Time to have a look at all things happening in the world of education. We do that with Professor John Fischetti from the University of Newcastle. Good morning, John. And once again, we find ourselves talking how education is going to position itself moving forward in a term we're hearing a lot of. I don't like the term, but it is what it is for now, a COVID normal world and existence. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Yes, I think that term I'm not 100% a fan of, but I like the spirit. And in Australia and New Zealand, we may be able to be thinking in this COVID normal reality. Isn't it amazing that young people are in the final stages of doing HSC in a year where a few months ago we wondered if that could happen?
Yeah.
And schools have been basically open the whole time, where in other countries they're shut down and haven't come back at all. India, in the U.S., in many states, in Europe now, back home. In that COVID normal reality, I'm trying to have us see beyond. So what now are the big issues in education that if we rewound to January, we might have done if we hadn't had COVID come our way? So we're looking at 2021 in some respects, but in many ways, schools are back to whatever this all is that we're trying to do, which is COVID normal.
Sounds pretty good. Okay, I guess if we sort of track through some of the priorities, John, I guess well-being of staff and students has got to be on the list.
Yeah, I think a decade ago you would have always said it's about rigor and academics and what did children learn, their literacy and their numeracy. But what we've done this year is really reprioritized. And the bushfires following the drought really did that as well, is how you're going and how you're doing is absolutely crucial. And schools around the student well-being and their staff well-being have prioritized that in the new plans they're writing. Every couple of years, schools have to revise their plans. Isn't that remarkable that we moved from schools primarily as an academic place to a gathering place of humans that need to be going well? I think it's a healthy sign, actually.
It also brings us to something that we've sort of been banging on about for quite some time before all of this too, is that the idea that we need to sort of be constantly changing and evolving in terms of how schools approach learning and teaching and all of that. And this year's kind of forced everybody to do that anyway.
Isn't it amazing that this year has changed?
We were ahead of the game.
Yeah, how schools have been forced to think differently about assessment. So when schools were doing things at home, and there's still places I know where young people are home because they're vulnerable, we've been able to do assessment differently, for example, like use anything in your kitchen that's safe to do this assessment task rather than the teacher handing things out. That notion of co-constructing learning and giving students that autonomy to build things is a really future-focused skill that I think we got to build in. We just can't go back to sitting them in rows and talking to them. It's a different kind of school, and I think that's another exciting component for the future.
Which also kind of ties in one of those very basic notions of what school and education is all about. It's actually just teaching you to think.
Right.
I mean, that forces you to do that with your own environment.
Yeah, and taking charge of that, it's self-regulation we talked about before. That leads to the third point, Mark, and that's around the big challenge that teachers have every day. Will I teach a lot of things, or will I teach fewer things really well? That breadth versus depth. And I think what we found during this year, and I think it carries forward into COVID normal, is actually we get more out of the things that we take pride in, that might take a little more time, that we have to do a little more investigation on. And we've been rushing through the curriculum. So finding a way to do less, but making sure those things last a lifetime, like the stories you and I have shared about the real learning we got in school that we can remember back from year 1 and 2, even to today.
Yeah, that's true, as opposed to just ticking off a list very, very quickly, getting writer's cramp from ticking all the boxes.
And that means we've gotten through to chapter 23, but no one remembers anything.
What happened on chapter 3? I can't remember what we did there. Of course, smart technologies this year also forced everybody to become very au fait with all of that. And I guess this idea there might also be a teacher shortage. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the smart technologies is really, we let kids do things during their COVID time that then we can't use at school. We're going to have to reckon with that one. All the evil side is real, but we're going to have to reckon with it. But actually, the most prevalent issue in education this decade, as we can say we're still at the start of this one, even if it feels like it's over already, is that in certain areas, certain regions, and now across the board, we're thousands of teachers short in the next few years to staff our schools really well. Some of that will be aided by the fact that teachers have been really well appreciated because of COVID, but still the disincentives that have been caused by the overregulation of the profession means we're probably losing the chance to recruit some of our top students into teaching. We're going to have to get that right because we're going to be left with a staff shortage in New South Wales, all around Australia, and already in the developing world of hundreds of thousands and millions of teachers on the planet. But right here, thousands of teachers short. Highly qualified people who are the right people to have in front of your niece or nephew.
Trying to get all of that right in the new COVID normal. Again, not happy with the term, but it is what it is. John Fischetti, it's always a pleasure, and we'll see how some of that pans out as we look towards 2021.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.